While humanitarian cash transfer programming has been a reality for many years, recent emergencies in the Philippines and in the Syria crisis have demonstrated a growing interest in humanitarian actors in the use of cash as a modality of response. Increasingly, cash transfers are being used in more than one sector or as a multi-purpose response option to best meet basic needs of crisis and disaster-affected communities. At the same time, a range of different initiatives from donors and operational agencies have emerged that consider the potential of cash transfers as a multi-sector tool and the implications of an increase in multi-purpose cash for the humanitarian architecture. Against this backdrop, different models of cash coordination have emerged, presenting specific opportunities and challenges. With a view to learn lessons from recent experiences and to gather best practices for cash coordination in the field, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, the Cash Learning Partnership, and the Swiss Agency for Development and Cooperation organised a global learning event in Geneva in May 2015. Loretta Huber-Girardet, Chief of the Intercluster Coordination Section of the United Nations Office, highlights some of the key issues around the coordination of cash transfers.
OCHA is really taking on board the fact that cash is becoming an increasingly important modality of response in emergencies. And we saw this with the Philippines, but it hasn't stopped there. Iraq, the Syria crisis, Ukraine, and then most recently Nepal demonstrates to us the importance of making sure that cash coordination is taking place within the broader context of a humanitarian response. This workshop is an opportunity to really look at how do we ensure that cash as a response modality is integrated into the humanitarian program cycle and into the coordination structures that we have in place to respond to emergencies.
Cash coordination had been the focus of a learning event in 2012. Sarah Alma, coordinator of the Cash Learning Partnership, highlights some of the learning since then, remaining challenges and future opportunities.
So I think that some of the major learnings from last event is really that cash has gone to scale, but that we still have a long way to go. In terms of using the full opportunity that cash transfer program brings. And this also poses new challenges when it comes to predictable and accountable structures of leadership to make sure that cash transfer programming can be designed, implemented and evaluated in the most effective and efficient way.
Cash coordination mechanisms are now a common feature in emergencies around the world. In the past year alone, new cash working groups have been set up in Iraq, Ukraine, and most recently in Nepal. Around 25 cash working groups are active worldwide. Cash working groups are coordinated by different agencies depending on the context, are ad hoc in nature. Their roles, mandates, and responsibilities vary, and so does the level of interaction with other humanitarian coordination structures. The range of their activities and the inclusiveness of their membership can make them very effective coordination bodies. In parallel to the increasing use of cash transfers in a variety of sectors, such as in shelter, wash, and nutrition, the use of multi-sectoral and multi-purpose cash transfers is progressively considered as a potential response modality. Panelists invited to share their views on multi-purpose cash assistance underlined its potential as a game changer, challenging cluster divides, placing the decision-making into the hands of aid recipients themselves, and offering potential efficiency gains.
It's a really empowering tool in the sense of enabling people to do what they think is best in terms of their needs. But it also raises issues relating to coordination, because whereas in the past perhaps there was coordination at sectorial level and a certain degree of intersectorial coordination, I think the advent of multi-purpose cash requires the humanitarian community to rethink how that architecture should change. Multi-purpose cash means that you're talking about multi-sector. And that in itself requires very much more of a coordination between the various humanitarian actors that are supporting people who are affected by disaster.
Several prerequisites for a greater uptake of multi-purpose cash were also discussed. These include the following: resolving the existing tension between a sector-based cluster system, sectorial mandates, and multi-purpose assistance, developing robust response analysis frameworks and tools, identifying mechanisms for pooling funds and sharing data in order for agencies to contribute to joint multi-purpose responses, Technical implications of multi-purpose cash transfers were further debated during group discussions.
So what we've been focusing on the discussion were around a question about what are the challenges in terms of coordination, but also what does it imply in terms of harmonization of the response. Some of the topics requires more harmonization than others. So for instance, targeting of the population, defining a common amount of the transfer needs stronger harmonization than, for instance, monitoring and evaluation processes, accountability systems. For the last component, monitoring and evaluation and accountability, we mentioned that harmonization is maybe less important than having a strong coordination, but also on the other side having basic packages of what needs to be respected by the different stakeholders. One important aspect coming to that is that we have to be careful when we talk about harmonization and coordination. It does not mean that every single intervention has to be exactly the same, and it's important to keep some flexibility and adaptability to the specific needs of specific population and context.
The various dimensions of preparedness were the focus of two other focus groups. As highlighted already during the 2012 event, organisations' commitments to capacity building needs to be encouraged. This includes not only training staff, but also working on identifying common processes that would require harmonisation for a more coordinated, rapid response in the aftermath of a disaster. The establishment of minimum standards for cash preparedness and the encouraging of advocacy efforts towards donors to ensure the allocation of appropriate resources towards cash preparedness were identified as the next steps. Taking note of the use of the Philippine social protection system for the delivery of emergency assistance as part of the response to Typhoon Haiyan, another group discussed the challenges related to engaging with national governments. Participants recognised the value of engaging social safety nets in implementing emergency cash transfers. The context-specific nature of current engagement opportunities for the adoption of digital targeting and payment systems were also discussed, particularly in regard to low and middle income countries. Establishing a global cash working group was identified as an appropriate way to foster dialogue with humanitarian and development actors to further that engagement. Invited to share their position on cash coordination, donor agencies expressed their support for multi-purpose cash-based interventions where appropriate. Illustrating that position, the European Commission's Humanitarian Aid and Civil Protection Department presented their 10 principles for multi-purpose cash, paving the way for greater advocacy with other donors and partners.
But work that we've done has indicated very strongly that in many contexts cash is more efficient and more effective in meeting people's multi-purpose needs in emergencies. Obstacles to achieving this, I think one main obstacle is the fact that we're still not doing this to scale. We are still doing this at low level, reaching large numbers of populations, but in the grand scheme of need, I think that there is a long way to go. So to get more efficiency, more effectiveness gains, we need to be able to go more on the front foot with cash, maybe alongside in-kind, maybe hybrid where cash and in-kind are used together. Regarding coordination on the big picture of the cluster systems, cash is very much being integrated into clusters, and that relies very much on goodwill, knowledge, and the right person having the right conversations. I feel that this needs to be done in a more formal system, formal way, and I think what is lacking at the moment is the sort of political drive within a lot of these institutions to make that happen.
During the concluding session of the event, participants agreed on a number of recommendations. Those recommendations are articulated around the creation of a space at global level for the discussion of strategic issues related to cash transfers, the leadership at country level to ensure appropriate consideration, and integration of cash-based responses and a greater collaboration with government and private sector actors.
One of the key findings was really that the humanitarian country teams should take a much more proactive role on kind of deciding on strategic cash issues that a technical cash working group would not necessarily be able to decide on. They have already initiated concrete next steps how they want to address capacities of humanitarian coordinators and humanitarian country teams in dealing with the cash challenge. Now at the international level, the equivalent would be the interagency standing committee, and also there was some agreement that within that interagency standing committee, the whole cash coordination challenges should be kind of fed into and brought up and kind of find a place to be discussed.
For more information on the event, go to www.cashlearning.org/coordination.